Another day, another dollar as I holler to the world. I love the way I'm living, love the Gucci, love the girls, love the parties and the clubs, love the models and hot tubs, love the German engineering set on deep dish dubs. Another tour around the world, entertaining the fans. I love walking through the airport, taking pictures, shaking hands. Every day for me's an oyster, crack it open, find a pearl. I love the way I live is what I holler to the world.
Welcome back to Marking Out with MVP and Dwayne Swayze.
He's Dwayne Swayze.
He's MVP. How you doing, P?
I'm good, man. I'm doing real good.
And
Yeah,
guys,
feeling all right.
I know by the time you guys see this, it's probably going to be later in June or somewhere around then. But
Summertime.
yeah, mid June, somewhere around there. But Pete, I know WrestleMania just happened.
Yep.
How was Vegas, man?
Vegas was amazing. I was out there for actually for two things. I was there for Slamfest at the Palms and WrestleCon. And WrestleCon was amazing. 2 days, you know, me, Bobby, and Sheldon, the Hurt Syndicate.
Right on.
You know, shout out to everybody that came to WrestleCon, for all the wrestlers and everybody in the business. But specifically for those of you that came by and spent money at the Hurt Syndicate section, those of you who bought the 8x10s and the photo ops and the pro photo ops with all of us, thanks a lot. We had a great time. Slamfest was awesome at the Palms. Shout out to the Palms. They put us up, had an amazing party. It's a great time. And then, of course, we had Fourth Rope. That was,
the commissioner right in front
the
of me.
commissioner of Fourth Rope. Heels have eyes, baby.
Right up.
And what impressed me about that, the show started at 12:45 is when we started. I didn't get out of there till like 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, man, I thought you were talking afternoon.
No, it was supposed to be a midnight show.
Oh,
But
man.
what impressed me was the fans. It was 3:30 when we got to the finish of the main event and then the aftermath and everything.
Yeah.
And people were still there. Like, people were still in their seats,
on.
still consuming,
Right
you know.
on.
And on the finish, there was a schmoz that happened afterwards, because there's a reality of wrestling versus Fourth Rope crossover thing happening. So some of Booker's guys from Reality of Wrestling came out, and then there was a video on the big screen from Booker, Zilla Fatu. So people were leaving and they stopped, and, you know, those who stayed got to see, like, oh, wow, you know. But it was late, but man, that energy was still there, man. People were tired, but they still had the energy.
Right on.
It was a great weekend, man. You know, WrestleMania week it's not just WrestleMania, it's WrestleMania week, you know.
Yeah.
And you've got I think 90 different independent shows going on, and the parties and WrestleCon, and, you know, there's so much happening. And it's always a great time, man. And it's always, you get to see people you haven't seen in a while, old friends, new friends, you know. So it's a great week. So Vegas was awesome. Thanks for asking.
Did Smoke Dizzle get in the ring? Because I've been seeing him on Fourth Rope get involved.
Oh, yeah, he got in the ring on an earlier show where he actually got involved in physicality. With this show, we actually performed the Hurt Syndicate.
Y'all did the song?
Yeah, we did the song. Bobby and Shelton came out with the AEW tag team, you know, the Hurt Syndicate in the building. We performed it live.
Right on.
Man, it was a great time, man. You should have been there.
Yeah.
Should have been there.
I should have been there. Next time. Yeah, next time. So those of you tuning in, if you don't know what we do at Marking Out, this is the product of what happens when your best friend is a professional wrestler. Yeah, I get to ask all the questions that everybody would like to know. And, you know, we do that every week, every Monday. Make sure you guys sign up to the Patreon for exclusive behind-the-scenes footage. You get even more MVP, more in-depth stories. It's real cool, man.
And you get a chance to become my friend and submit questions as well. And Dwayne Swayze will give you a shout-out and ask your question. Lucky you.
Yeah, right on. So today, first question of the day. What is locker room heat? And what are the biggest reasons someone might get heat backstage?
Perfect segue while you're talking about heat. How about we pour a little heat?
Right on.
A little Devil's River bourbon here.
Yeah, so this I haven't had this one.
No, this is a new one. We haven't had this one yet. This is Devil's River bourbon, straight bourbon whiskey, and then we got barrel strength over here. This one's 117 proof.
We got some water though, right?
Yeah, we got water. We got water on deck. All right,
so what is locker room heat, and what are the biggest reasons someone might get heat backstage?
well, here's to not getting heat in the locker room. So What is locker room heat? Locker room heat is when you are not over with the boys, meaning you have done something or some things. A lot of the time, especially if you're a rookie, takes a few things to build up that heat, you know. But it's things that are offensive to the locker room, to the boys. Things, you know, inconsiderate, rude. I'll tell you one thing that goes way back. You want to get yourself some heat in the locker room? Have some stinky gear. You know, because you got guys, sadly, that just have issues with hygiene. And they don't wash their gear. And I remember, like, on the indies, there were certain guys that, you know, they've only do like one show a month. And they throw their gear in the bag, get home, leave it in the bag, and then whatever, you know, let it marinate and fester. And then they show up to the next show, bring their bag and open it up, and it's like, yo, my man.
It's been baking.
Yeah, I've actually, back in indie days, not as a pro, but I've actually had to take people's bags and literally throw them out the locker room. Like, how dare you disrespect us like that? You're so unprofessional that you don't even have the self-respect, let alone the courtesy, the respect of the profession and your colleagues to wash your fucking gear. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, it's funny. I have a thing. Like, when I would wrestle and I get all my gear on, I'm ready to go, I would always give myself a couple of quick spritz, you know, just, I don't know, just, I'm smelling fresh, man, you know, like, and if you're working with me, we got, oh man, VP, you smell good, man, damn right I smell good, you know. One time I remember the Boogeyman, poor guy, great guy, Boogeyman's an awesome dude, but remember he had the worms.
Oh, yes.
And he would put the worms in his pockets, you know, the leather pants that he had. And then he would pull them out and, you know, do his whole shtick. Well, sadly, one weekend, he forgot that he left the worms in the pockets of his pants. And the locker room was so rancid. Like, people were burning incense, and it was horrible. And under normal circumstances, Boogeyman would have got kicked out the locker room. Yeah. But because Boogeyman was such a great guy, and everybody liked him, and this wasn't, you know, a regularly occurring thing with him. It was a freak, you know, like, oh shit, I forgot. He was embarrassed, apologetic, and it was disgusting, but we laughed about it. But other offenses include things like, you know, back in the day, and you know, things are changing a bit, but back in the day, if you were a younger talent and a veteran came in, you know, you'd offer him your seat. Hey man, you want my seat? Or if you're on the bus traveling, you know, things like that. If you didn't do that, if you didn't defer to the vet, like, hey, you know, that would get you heat. Going over your time in the ring. If you guys got 10 minutes and you just decide, I'm going to do 20. Well, now you're cutting into my time. You're cutting into everybody else's time. That's another way to get yourself some heat. If somebody has a signature move and you decide you're going to start doing their signature move.
Well, people aren't crazy enough to do that.
Oh, man, that happens all the time. Sure, that happens, man. I'll tell you, here's a funny story. And unfortunately, no heat came out of it. But it was pretty awkward. Very awkward. But, so Low Key used to do this move where he would jump up on the second rope and do like a springboard and come back with a kick. And me and John Morrison, he of the many names, Johnny Mundo, Johnny, you know, I was saying, hey, you know what would be a good move for you, man? Low Key does this thing where he bounces off the second rope and does this jumping kick. Man, you could do that pretty well. So he adds that to his repertoire. He starts doing it. He starts doing it on TV. There's an unwritten rule in the world of professional wrestling. Whoever does it on TV first, that's their move. Now, Low Key has been doing this on TV all over the world, mind you, you know, but not Fed TV, you know. Well, Low Key finally gets into the Fed. And John Morrison had this awkward conversation talking to Low Key about, hey, would you mind not doing your move that I do now?
No.
No, it was all funny in the end. Like, there was no heat behind it. But things like that happen where guys will, I'm doing this move now. Well, hey, well, that's my move. Would you mind not doing it? You know, there was if I don't have this wrong, Muhammad Hassan, who you know, he used to come out with Davari when he was
Oh,
the Arab
the
terrorist
character they
kid,
had to
right?
take off of.
Right, yeah. He had too much heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
he had the go away heat,
Yeah.
not the. Well, he was doing the camel clutch, but that move actually, Gory Guerrero used to do that move, and I think I might get crucified here if I mess this up, but I think that was the Gory special, or it was I forgot. But Gory Guerrero of the Guerreros used to do that move. So of course Eddie Guerrero would do that move, and Muhammad Hassan, who had massive locker room heat, nuclear locker room heat. He had the audacity to go and ask Eddie to stop doing his move, and everybody was like,
But he was brand new in the business too, right? Oh boy.
yeah, as a matter of fact, he had so much locker room heat that they were at the bar one night, and business gets done at the bar. Again, the culture's changing, but through the years, hang out at the bar, the hotel bar, or whatever, start rubbing shoulders, you get to know people, have some drinks, socialize, and you get. But discipline also gets done at the bar. A lot of the time, they'd get a guy down at the bar and start grilling him for what he did to get the locker room heat. And I forgot who all was involved, but they had Muhammad Hassan order shots for everybody. The bartender poured up like, I don't know, a couple dozen shots or whatever. Everybody raised up their glasses and poured them out.
Oh.
And then ordered
Man.
a second round. So, yeah. I mean, The Miz got locker room heat because, and Mike's a great guy, but he just grew up in a bubble. So, like, socially, he didn't understand, like, stepping on somebody's shoe and some places could get you killed.
Yeah, it's a problem.
He'd step on your shoe and just not even say, oh, sorry, dude. You're like, no, my man, you stepped on my shoe, dude. That was not, sorry, like. So one day he would be oblivious, his self-awareness in certain situations. He just hadn't had enough life experience in those areas to know when he was stepping on toes figuratively. And I was there when it happened, when he famously got kicked out of the locker room, when Benoit kicked him out of the locker room because he was eating fried chicken and he was standing over Scott Armstrong's bag. And the Armstrongs are a respected name in wrestling. Bullet Bob Armstrong and all of his boys were, respected in the industry by everyone. And at this point, Scott Armstrong was a referee. One of my favorite referees, too. He was awesome because he'd be in the ring during your matches and he'd be, especially for the younger guys, he was like an extra coach. All right, calm down, relax, catch your breath. Here's a good time to breathe right now.
Okay.
All right, you guys. All right, here we're going in the finish. Get ready to get fired up, boys. Here we go. Like he was dope in that way. But so he was beloved by everybody. And Miz was eating fried chicken and all the crumbs were just dropping into Scott's bag. And Scott goes, "Hey, Miz, what the fuck, man?" And Miz, like, huh, what? All your crumbs are dropping in the bag, man. He goes, I'm sorry. And then Chris has got up and like, Miz, you're always fucking up some kind of way. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. And Miz, for a long time, wasn't allowed to dress in the dressing room with the boys.
It wasn't just that day.
No. He got kicked out. So he had to dress in mop closets, broom closets, the hallway, the bathroom, and the promenade with fans. He was not allowed in the locker room. He got kicked out of the locker room. It wasn't until after Benoit died that Miz went to Taker and asked for permission to come back in the locker room. So, but here's the thing about it though, and this is what got Miz over in the long run. He didn't bitch, he didn't complain, he didn't cry. He took his lumps, he went, sat, he still worked his ass off every night, did everything he was supposed to do, and just, when the time came back around, he was allowed back in. But locker room heat just comes primarily from disrespect. If you disrespect the veterans, you do something disrespectful to the business, you're unprofessional in some sort of way, then people just won't like you. And, it's always better to have camaraderie and be in a situation where everybody feels good and is looking out for one another than to have we don't like that guy. And then, life gets real rough on the road, in lots of different ways.
What are unspoken rules about calling spots in the ring, especially when working with someone new?
Unspoken rules. I don't really think there's any unspoken rules. I think a lot of it comes down to your training and common sense. So nowadays, traditionally, historically, spots were called in the ring because the wrestlers didn't talk about their matches beforehand. A lot of the time, they were in completely different locker rooms. All they knew was a finish, and they had to go out there. And as I've touched on before, call it on the fly. Had to work. And it was, with the popularity of modern television and the sports entertainment aspect where guys got to talk beforehand to lay out elaborate spots. With unspoken rules, I don't even think it's that as much as it just comes down to a lot of common sense, because you're taught early on with pro wrestling, it's like a language. First you learn the alphabet, and then you learn how to make words with that alphabet. And then you progress to being able to make sentences with those words. And then it goes to the point where you're having matches and you're telling a whole story. But you have to start with lock up.
Man, that is beautifully put. I just want you made everything just make sense to me. It's like, yeah, okay, right on.
So having said that, chemistry comes from working with somebody multiple times. You start to get a feel for that person. You get a feel for their rhythm, for their tendencies. And sometimes if you've worked with a person enough, this crazy thing happens where we can communicate just by looking at each other. I don't have to tell you what I'm gonna do. Just you see by my facial expression and how I set myself, oh, he wants me to do this, or vice versa. And when you're doing spots, the common sense is, I've never worked with you before. And if you say, hey, I've got this move I like to do where it requires this jumping spin thing and I land you on your shoulders, I'm gonna pass on that, brother. I don't know you. This is our first time working. Let's go out there and just, get comfortable and just keep it basic. And if we're out there working on the fly, then you can't call, spinning, twisting, reverse, whatever. Like, I'm gonna hold on to the ropes and go, nope, I never did that before. I don't know how to do that. And that's what you're taught. Like if a guy called, like early on, when you're taught how to wrestle and you're taught how to call spots, one of the things that if you're at a proper wrestling school and you're being taught by people who know, you're taught that if someone backs you into the ropes to send you off and they call something and you don't hear it, don't go. If someone calls and says,
Okay.
and shoots you off and you go to hit the ropes and you're coming back, you have no idea what they're doing. Yeah. So what are you going to feed for? How are you going to protect yourself?
You're going to get hurt.
You're going to get hurt, or they might get hurt, So the Extreme Shaw, ECW alumni, Hack Myers, he was one of the guys that when I was breaking in, it was around the South Florida area. And, he helped mentor me a bit. And remember one day he backed me into the ropes to shoot me off. And he went, and went to shoot me off. And I just held on. I said, I didn't hear you. And he got on me a bit and he goes, I said, man, I can't hear you, man. And he says, God damn it, clothesline. And he shoots me. And then he gives me the clothesline and I sell. And I'm like, what was that all about? But then afterwards, he comes up and goes, man, I was just messing with you, man. I wanted to see.
Oh, he was bullshit.
He was testing me. Yeah, he was testing me. He just wanted to see what I would do. If I was, green enough that I'd run off and just come back and, hey, what's going on here, But both times I held on, like, dude, I can't hear you, man. What'd you say? I'm not letting you shoot me off, So I remember the first time I had a chance to work with Marty Jannetty. It was in Tallahassee for this independent company in Tallahassee. And I swear it was like that scene from The Wrestler. It was, dude, I'd never met Marty Jannetty, but he's sizing me up. He sees, I look athletic, my gear looks good, and people are like, oh yeah, MVP. Well, back then, Antonio Banks. Like, I had a little reputation, for I was getting over. And he called some shit, and we just had a conversation just to see where I'm at. He got a feel for me, kept it very basic. But once we got out there and we started working a little bit, he got comfortable with me. And he told me afterwards, he goes, no, I could tell you knew what you were doing. So he started calling shit. And at one point, he did something called a power bomb. You know, that's not something usually vets will let some young jacked up kid, you know. But I took care of him. Everything was good. And, you know, he started calling stuff. And I was like, okay, all right, you know. And we ended up having a really good match. And afterwards, like that scene from The Wrestler, you know, he was like, man, has Vince seen you yet, man? You know, like, so I'm
You
like,
need
yeah,
to get
you know,
called.
yeah, man, you all right, kid? You going somewhere, you know? And Marty, we had a really good match. But once he got comfortable with me, he started calling things that were a little bit more complicated or potentially dangerous. But yeah, if somebody, here's a great story. It was Jersey All Pro Wrestling, and it was during the Beatdown Clan era.
Wow,
And it was
BDC.
MVP and Samoa Joe versus Chris Hero and the infamous Teddy Hart. Now, Teddy Hart's quite a character. And I've always been okay with Teddy, but I've said this publicly and privately. I can take Teddy in small doses. So in the back, we put together a basic outline layout for the match. And we decide that it's going to be Joe up on Teddy. And all right, cool, everything's good. As soon as Chris Hero leaves, Teddy starts trying to politic to change the finish to Chris Hero. And me and Joe look at each other, we're like, dude, I said, hey, watch this, Teddy. You want to see how easy this works? Watch this. The finish is now Chris Hero over on me. See how easy that works? And he goes, no, I didn't mean it like that, man. No, yes, the fuck you did. You know? As soon as that man walked out, you start trying to put, well, no, he's done that to me before. We're like, no, dude, like, we're going to keep the finish as it is. Joe, on you, you know? So we get out there, and it's on YouTube, okay? I saw it recently. Somebody posted it, where he and I somehow we end up fighting outside the ring. And he drapes me across the barricade, like lengthwise. Yeah. So it's like splitting my legs and my chest is on it and I'm there. And he goes, stay for the moonsault. And I'm laying there selling as he goes back into the ring.
Oh.
And I go, oh, hell no.
Yeah,
I'm not going to let you moonsault onto me laying on top of this bed. Yeah. No, absolutely not. What the hell were you thinking? So I get down, and this dude does a springboard. He looks at me and sees I'm not there anymore. And for whatever reason, he just does a springboard moonsault just into the crowd. Like, I'm over here, he's over here, which I don't know how he was going to do that moonsault anyway, but then he just moonsaults into the crowd. And luckily, the guys that were there were, you know, some young, bigger guys. You know, nobody got hurt by him doing that nonsense. Wow. But if you see the clip, like I look at those guys and they're looking at me, and I just punched Teddy in the face. Bam! What the hell were you doing? What were you thinking? You thought I was gonna stay there for that? So we get back, we fight back into the ring. I think we tagged out or whatever, and then I let Teddy take over on me again. And he puts me down and he goes, are you going to stay for the moonsault this time? And he goes to hit a moonsault. No, I'm not going to stay, especially not asking like that, you know, like, no. So he went up for the moonsault and I rolled out of the way. Then I forgot what happened. The match continued, and then somehow I'm in there with Chris Hero now. And Chris goes, stay for the moonsault? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you got it, bud.
Yeah, you hit it, you know. But coming back to the rule, dude, I don't know what the hell you're doing. Yeah. And I don't trust you to do it. Now, if it's something that is complicated and before the match, you said, hey, I have this thing I like to do. I'd like to get it in if it's cool. And then you show me how it goes. We talk about it. And if I'm comfortable with it, then yeah, okay, cool. You know, well, and the way I like to call matches anyway, I don't like to call spot for spot. I used to do that. Like most of us did when we first started memorizing this long sequence. You know, I don't care to do that anymore, but I do like to have an outline. I like to have a finish, possibly a break spot, and this, if I do this, you do that. You know, and nowadays, if I'm on an indie show and I'm working with a young guy I've never met before, I'll tell him, give me 3 things you really like to do. And I'll let that person say, okay, well, I do this, I do this, I do this. Okay, cool. We'll plug those in. if I'm cool with him.
Right,
If he
right.
says, yeah, the other thing I do is a spinning scorpion death plant, whatever, like, that's a great idea for you to do with somebody else.
Yeah, that's not gonna work for me, brother.
That's not going to work for me, brother. Yeah, but give me 3 things you want to do. And then through the course of the match, I'll say, hey, go hit this now, and that's at that point. But I don't, as far as rules regarding, calling it in the ring, it's just being comfortable with the person you're working with and not taking unnecessary risks, doing something you've never done before. If somebody calls something you've never done before, say no. Say, no, I don't know what that is. I've never done that before. And you just let that go, and do something, body slam.
Right. And so, P, so you're going to indie show, quick little side quest here. Who calls the match?
Traditionally, the heel leads the match. And if not the heel, then the veteran with more experience.
Oh.
Nowadays, though, you got it's a huge case of the blind leading the blind, because you got a lot of young people out there that don't have a lot of experience, that think they know what they're doing. And, it's just 2 people, with paintbrushes just splashing paint all over the place, rather than somebody saying, okay, this paint goes here, this paint goes here, and this is how you get this masterpiece. And then it's all a matter of taste. Some people like the senseless spot fest, and, some people prefer a more tempered storytelling type of match. And one thing The Undertaker taught me, and I've held on to this, what we do in the ring is tell stories. The moves are the illustrations. So if you got a comic book and it's all bing, bam, boom, this doesn't make any sense, But if it's, okay, this guy's walking down an alley, and these 2 guys are watching him, and these 2 guys jump this guy, and out of the shadows comes this superhero, and then there's a bing, bam, bam. Oh, okay, he's saving this guy. I get the story, And that's the approach that I've always liked to take, storytelling. But I don't do reckless things. And if someone suggests it, nope.
Yeah.
We're not doing that. So, safety first.
10-4. What does it take to get the push? And what makes management decide that someone is ready for the main event?
Oh, man. That's dude, tell me. The push. The mythical push. That's one of those things that it all depends on who's in charge, what they're looking for. I mean, traditionally, the push is supposed to be given to talent that looks like they can draw money. Somebody who displays charisma, presence, in-ring ability, durability. You can't get hurt all the time. Dependability. Somebody that you can count on. Not to. Which is funny because historically you've got some of the greats that would be face down in their food and catering. Drug addicts and whatnot. But generally speaking, it would help if you're not that. But it didn't impede some people. But it's funny because when I was in WWE, they would always talk about the brass ring. That guy who reaches up for the brass ring. And, we used to joke about it, me and Carlito and Shelton and, a few bunch of other people. Like, I used to say the brass ring is on a shoelace around Bigfoot's neck, and he's riding on the back of Pegasus. And that's where the brass ring is. There's no reaching up and grab the brass ring. The brass ring is slipped onto your finger. They pick who they want to be that person. Because if you look through the years, lots of people have organically gotten themselves over, and they weren't picked by the empire to get over.
Daniel Bryan comes to mind immediately.
He's the first person that comes to mind. He's not somebody that Vince ever would have chosen to be a world champion. Just because of his size alone, I was there during the time that Vince said if they're under 6 feet tall and under 200 pounds, I don't want to see him. There was a phase where that was actually the directorate. And So under those guidelines, he would have never got a chance, But organically, he got himself over to the point that all of the fan base said, we like this guy. And they forced the office's hand. Same thing with Kofi Mania.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Kofi, same. It was almost the same D-Bride type situation. He organically got himself over. So they didn't set out to push him in that way. He caught a wave and was riding it. Now, the New Day got a big push as a group, for what they were doing. But, typically the push comes from you're a talent that the office looks at and says, this person has the characteristics that we like for our brand. And we want to make this person our brand ambassador. So when they put the company title on you, what they're saying is, we are investing in you to be our brand ambassador. And a lot of the time in the business, the way it works, initially, the belt makes you, but then later on, you make the belt.
For
John Cena is a perfect example of that. When John Cena first became champion, okay, now he's solidified. At this point, he's the champion. There's no question about it. And then after he had several of those runs, when he went back to the U.S. title, well, that U.S. title suddenly has more significance because a multi-time world champion is carrying it, So initially, in an attempt to make you the star, to make you important, to get fans to put their trust in you, they put the title on you. And then if you carry that title, you have a good, successful run, title success, defenses, and the people are buying the merch, they're buying the pay-per-views, they're buying the tickets. That's the metric to know. You have people that feel like, oh, well, I should be the champ. Yeah, but ain't nobody buying tickets to see you.
right.
No, you're not selling any merch. Just because you're a good wrestler doesn't mean that you should be the world champion. That's not what it's about. Hulk Hogan is a horrible wrestler, but Ultimate Warrior, terrible wrestler. But the charisma,
Right.
presence,
Right.
they did just enough, just right, that people didn't care about all that other stuff. That's my guy. Yeah, and if people are showing you, if you look out in the audience and you see a bunch of red and yellow t-shirts,
Right, that's selling.
obviously this is working.
Well, let me ask you about Kofi, because I remember that, and that was dope, seeing Kofi up there. And I think the last thing in the story is probably what I tried to remove from memory, is Brock just kind of coming in and taking him out, and it was all over. Maybe something like that. But were there metrics that they looked at and would say, okay, well, Kofi can't lead the company? Why would they take it? Or is that just Vince saying, I don't want this guy, we got to move him out?
I don't know. It would seem that, to me, I thought that was just stupid, just killing Kofi off like
Yeah.
that. I feel there was, I don't know, I could be completely wrong. I feel that there was some measure of disingenuousness with that. I can't say exactly why, but I just thought that there was no need to do that to Kofi. I thought that was ridiculous. And a lot of people felt that way. I don't know. And I was speaking in that situation specifically about WWE and Vince, but it depends from company to company who the decision maker is. Primarily what you want is somebody who, like I said, has charisma, presence, solid ring ability, and dependability. Somebody that you can trust. As a company, you're getting behind this individual. This is your guy. This is the one you're trusting to sell the merch and sell the tickets, and you're going with this guy. So or woman, as the case may be. So they need to have those qualities. And you know what, as a side note, this is something that I try to communicate to young indie workers. You want to set your price on the indies, your booking fee. And some talent are unrealistic about their booking fee. And yes, you should know your worth, absolutely. But sometimes I see there's a disconnect from the business of pro wrestling. Like, you can be a pretty good hand, you got some cool stuff that you do, maybe you have a little presence. You're young, you're green, but you feel like you should be paid $300, and this promoter should fly you in, put you up in a hotel, and pay you $300. Well, okay, but are you paying for yourself? If tickets are $25 a pop, then I need 12 people to buy a ticket to see you, just to cover your pay, not to cover your airfare and your hotel, And if, it's recently it happened. I was talking to this young indie person that was talking about what they should get and what they should have. Who out there bought a ticket to see you? I don't see one person out there wearing your t-shirt. Ain't nobody buying your shirts. Nobody said, oh man, I bought a ticket to come see this person. But when you get to that box office level, where you get to, the all-time greats, again, I'm using WWE as an example. Let John Cena show up for a Monday Night Raw and let them put, John Cena will be on this Monday Night Raw. You're going to sell another 4,000 or 5,000 tickets. Right. It's just going to happen like that. Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns, and, those guys over there. At AEW, a lot of those things are the same in terms of, the person that you would want. But Tony has a different philosophy. Tony likes to give people opportunities. WWE was opportunities as well, but you'd want to see a certain metric before you make that decision. Tony, I think, likes to give people chances to see, okay, well, we're going to go with the title with this person. And it's ultimately what he gauges the fans want.
Okay.
And from company to company, I think it just comes down to who the decision makers are and what they're looking for. But generally, it should be the same thing. But again, you go from one company to the next, what they want. If you're working on the indies, the promoter books himself to be the champ a lot of the time, or, the person who kisses his ass the most, or, or his best friend. So there are different metrics that go into it, but ultimately the push is supposed to go behind the person that you think is going to be that box office draw that's going to put the asses in the seats. And going back to my point about a lot of young independent wrestlers, you want to be compensated for your work, but you're not putting any asses in the seats. If you can say that, hey man, there are 10 people here tonight that bought a ticket because they want to see me. All right, well now, when you come out and the whole crowd is chanting your name and, afterwards you're at your table buying your 8x10s and buying your t-shirts. All right, well now you're having an effect on the box office. You're becoming a draw. Getting over means that people are paying to see you. They want to buy your merch. They want to connect with you. And if you're a promoter, that's what you want. You want a locker room full of guys that are over. You want everybody to be selling t-shirts and merch, and you want everybody to be selling tickets. So that's what goes into the push.
Sure.
That's why I never got one.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Marking Out with MVP.
And Dwayne Swayze.
Do us a favor, click in the description. We've got links to MVP's socials.
Everything. We got
my socials.
Everything.
Join our Patreon if you guys want more exclusive behind the scenes footage, and also new episodes drop every Monday.
Hey, just let me tell you, for the Patreon subscribers, we have levels.
Oh yeah,
but there is exclusive content that I'm recording here that only you get access to. That's not going up on the main channel. Little behind the scenes stories, some very interesting things, some stuff that you've never heard before that I'm saving specifically for our Patreon subscribers. So, we just like to think of you joining us, pouring yourself a glass of something that you enjoy, pulling up a chair and joining us in a conversation about wrestling.
See you guys next week.
See you, Space Cowboy.
I just lay back in something new. Whiskey 21 and over, low ball. Make it too neat. Dizzer from Harlem. Yeah, I'm from Houston off of Fondren. Mike Mazan and real world flow.
plant these seeds in the streets and in weeks, watch it blossom. Dark night, riding on chrome, swinging through Gotham. It's me and P, repaving these roads.